Looks like we're live now with Facebook, and I appreciate everybody joining us tonight. Once again, my name is Don Fick, and I'm with the Library Telescope Task Force, and I got one of my colleagues here, Tom Lynch, who runs our Facebook page. We've been working together to broadcast once a month for almost 2 years, I guess now, various topics around the Library Telescope program. And our goals for our overall task force is to share best practices and grow the program. We're actually getting this program worldwide now. In fact, if you go to our librarytelescope.org website, you'll see a map. If you look at the locations, and you can actually click on the map and drill down. We've got locations. We're trying to assemble locations in various states, various provinces in Canada, and there's some in Europe. And you can actually see the locations that we know about where you can actually check out a library telescope. There are a couple of things before we get started with our program. There are program opportunities if you're a library, and we hope you're a library listening about maybe starting a program. The International Dark Sky Week is coming up here shortly. It's a great time to get telescopes. Encourage patrons to take their telescopes outside and enjoy the night sky. That's April 22nd through 30th. You can learn more about International Dark Sky Week at darksky.org. And for our Library Telescope Task Force, we have set aside the week of October 9th and through October 16th to basically have an International Library Telescope Observing Week. And that's just a week that we're saying, like, let's take 1 week and let's look at some cool stuff, things that the Library Telescope is really good at doing. And there's a lot of things it's very good at doing. And if you check on our website, you can learn a little bit more about that. So we've been, as I mentioned before, we've been doing these programs for some time now. You can see today we're doing on March 16th, libraries share their experiences. And this is Wichita, Kansas library system. We're really glad to have Sarah and Jerelyn here tonight. In April, there's kind of a special thing coming up in May. It's called Lunar Eclipse. In April, we're going to have a special program with Adler Planetarium to talk about really looking at the lunar eclipse through a library telescope. We think that's going to be a lot of fun. And you can look at all of our past programs on our YouTube. If you go to librarytelescope.org, go to the YouTube button at the very top right, you can go to that. And I really encourage you, Tom Lynch does such a terrific job on Facebook.com. If you're a Facebook user, he's got a lot of stuff. We've got over 3,000 people, and we're sharing a lot of great stuff out there. So I encourage you to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing here, and I'm going to bring our guest up here. I have Sarah Kittrell, is that right? From from the Wichita Library System. She's going to talk a little bit about her starting her program, and I've got along with her Jerelyn Ramirez. She's the past president of what was the Kansas Astronomical Observers? Did I get that right? Sorry about that.
You got it right.
I got it. I got it right or wrong?
You got it right.
Okay, cool, awesome. So what we're going to do tonight is we're just going to talk a little bit about really what it takes to start a library program. And I know that you've recently started. And Sarah, tell us a little bit about, first of all, a little bit about yourself, your library, and what your role is, if you could do that.
Yes, so my name is Sarah Kittrell, and I'm the Collection Development Division Manager at the Wichita Public Library. Wichita is a city about just slightly less than 400,000 people. It's the largest city in Kansas. And we have one main location and 6 branch locations. And my role is basically overseeing collections for the library system, the people who buy everything, catalog everything, etc. So, and coming up with fun ideas like adding telescopes.
All right, cool. So how many telescopes do you have today?
We currently have 16, 15 of which are circulating, one which we purchased for programming purposes. We started with 10 plus the initial programming one, but it was so popular we had to just up that almost immediately.
So when you say popular, what does that mean? Does that mean there's a waiting list for your telescopes today? Or
yeah,
how does that change over time?
We rolled out in mid-July, and for the first few days, we were having a hold placed every 4 minutes, and I did time that.
Gosh, oh my gosh!
So we were
at those
100...
little clocks up there saying, "Oh, we got another hold."
So we had 160 holds placed in the first couple weeks. We're obviously it's March now, and we still have 119 holds on them, despite adding an additional 5. Just in December, we finished doing the holds that were placed on the first and second day that they were live. So I told some people when they were placing holds that really you were going to get it in the winter. You weren't going to get it, anytime soon. So
you're telling people that they might actually retire before they actually get the telescope? Is that the way it
I'm
works?
sure some people did.
Yeah. All right. So let's think about this a second. So you're a library, and you typically are thought about as doing books, right? I mean, that's the kind of thing. Libraries, books. That's maybe music, something. But this is kind of a different thing to get into. So why did you decide to do a library telescope program?
Well, some various threads came together at about the same time, which made sense for us to launch a library of things, which is not completely unusual, though I think every library of things has a different emphasis. And as we were putting ours together, it ended up being mainly STEAM focused, so science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And we were lucky enough to have a donor that our foundation was aware of, who was interested in a sizable monetary donation to be used in that time, not put away to gather interest and give us a smaller amount every year. And so we put together a proposal for her that included 10 telescopes, and then we revised the proposal to up it to 15. Her family was very into education and I believe architecture and engineering. So this seemed like a good pairing to help encourage that in our community, where there's probably not a huge number of people who can afford to have telescopes themselves. So
were they on the waiting list by the chance?
Yeah, I know.
Well, you could actually get to see what you actually bought, but it'll be 3 years from now.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons she was very enthusiastic about it was because she'd had the opportunity to use a telescope out at a lake, I think at her grandparents' house, and had very fond memories of it. So being able to provide that for children who wouldn't necessarily have that opportunity was a very appealing idea to her.
So from a library's point of view, I mean, I'm not a librarian, but I'm thinking that it had to be kind of a scary thing. Like this is like a completely different thing. So what challenges did you face as a library when you started thinking about launching this thing? I mean, I'm sure it's everything from checkout procedures to how to keep it safe and everything else and not being scary and all that, right?
Right. Yeah. So we do our research before we launch anything. I will say the research period on this, due to the time frame I needed to put the proposal together in, was a very intensive but short research period.
And how long was that?
I knew other libraries were doing the program though, so I knew it would be feasible, even if we didn't have all of the T's crossed, I's dotted, when I put the proposal together. But I had very enthusiastic catalogers who she was so excited when I gave her telescopes and a few other things we launched. She just thought it was the best thing ever. So I have enthusiastic staff. I have staff, circulation staff, who are probably tired of me throwing new things at them, but they've just accepted it very well. And, we've learned from what other libraries have done, and we've made, Jerelyn was exceedingly helpful in giving us information. She and her group came down and made modifications to make the telescopes even more customer friendly. And really at this point, we haven't had any issues. So we did do a special work through with our circulation staff to just hammer out the circulation procedure and make sure that we were all on the same page before we actually launched. So that was a good way to figure out what pieces we'd forgotten.
Well, what's your sense? Is it mostly children that are checking out the telescopes, or adults, or families, or what is it? Do you know?
I think it has to be checked out on an adult's card. We don't let children check it out, but I do think it's a family activity that people are doing. I know that a lot of parents are excited to share it with their kids, and but I'm sure that some people in their retirement, or just working people like me, just who love the stars, also would be quite happy to check it out. So
I know a lot of people that I know, they buy a telescope and they never know how to operate this. Well, this one's actually fairly easy. Is that what you're getting? Is that people feel like it's fairly straightforward to operate from their perspective?
Yeah, it came with really good instructions. We created a get started video that's just a few minutes long to identify the pieces, or like give a visual of the pieces in the telescope, because I at least am a visual person, and saying, this is the easy eyepiece might not immediately tell me what exactly I should be looking for. We also have a technology training section at our library. So if people have more in-depth questions, we have dedicated staff for technology purposes who can assist them one-on-one with getting a better idea how to use the telescope. So. Yeah.
So for those that have just joined us, we will be taking questions at the end. We're talking about starting a library telescope program in Wichita, Kansas. And we got Sarah and Kittrell here from Wichita Library System, and Jerelyn Ramirez from the Kansas Astronomical Observers. She's helped them start that. So we will be taking questions. And if you're in Zoom, by the way, just go ahead and drop those into the Q&A box. And if you're on Facebook, put them in the comments area, and we'll be monitoring those. So let's talk about, Jerelyn, what did you do to help them? I know she said you made some changes, but what does that mean? Does that mean you're making lots of changes? Did you completely overhaul the telescope, or what happened?
Well, they actually bought the telescopes because they wanted such a large quantity of them from the Cornerstones of Science.
Oh yeah, okay, gotcha.
And I felt that was going to be a lot easier to take the middleman out, like me, because they would come here in St. Mary's, and then I would have to transport them all the way down to Wichita. And I was trying to think that was not very logistically savvy. So we just had her send and have them go directly to her. And then once she received them, then we actually finished out or did more modifications, such as putting the moon, the hole in the front cover,
yeah,
for the moon portal, and put a battery, change the battery from the button battery on the finder scope. And just a few minor modifications, and actually my background right here is
I was noticing that
telescopes. Yeah, that's the first 10 right there. And the two guys that are standing next to me, those are the guys that helped me out with this project. So, and it took us several hours to get through it, but we did it.
So I'll show off here. I'll do my background here. There you go. We did I'm from St. Louis. We did 50 at one time. That was quite a crazy thing. So you're like some little soldiers just set up. It's kind of cool, huh? All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and take one question. So the one question that I just got from looks like from Zoom here is, how long was your research period? How long did you take, Sarah, to actually research some of this?
So, well, I will say that the seed had been planted about 5 years ago or so to look at telescopes as a thing for our library, but at that point it wasn't feasible, just due to the scope of our collections and what we were working towards. I am on a listserv for collection managers for urban libraries, and they are a very, very knowledgeable group. And so I put out a call for information on how other people have handled non-traditional library items such as telescopes. We were also doing radon detectors and hotspots. So it was sort of a call for information on lots of different non-traditional things. I also just Googled library telescopes to see what people had on their websites. Found some very useful smaller websites that had some information on charges and transporting and those sorts of things. And just did a deep dive, I guess, into what was available, and then worked with my staff once we had the funding and the go-ahead, just to make sure that the program would work for us. I believe it was the Cornerstones of Science website that had some training videos, and so I certainly watched all of those just to get an idea, though we definitely adapted from some of their suggested practices, like the 15-minute training session at every checkout. We just don't have the staff capacity to do things like that. So we tried to make it as user-friendly as possible. And we did add a release form, or just so people would acknowledge the cost of the item and release us from liability if someone looked in the sun or dropped it on their foot or something like that. So
So I know one of the things that we talked about in preparing for this is that many of the libraries, let's say that they have 5 branches, they might put a telescope in every branch, and that's where you have to go to get that telescope.
Mhm.
Whereas other libraries, I think like yours, right? You're actually saying you can check it
Yes.
out from any branch and move it. Can you talk about that a minute?
Yeah, so we have, as I mentioned, a main location and our 6 branch locations. The branches range from very, very small to pretty large. And while the larger libraries might have been able to store telescopes, the smaller branches did not have secure storage for that sort of expensive piece of equipment. So what we've decided to do for the telescopes was to house them at our main library where we absolutely had the space, and then send them out for our deliveries to meet the branch needs. So we strapped them into the front seat of our delivery van. Our delivery driver was innovative and figured out a way to strap another one onto the floor of the front of the van so we could transport 2 at a time, because at the beginning they all went out at once, and most of them went out to branches. So it was an adjustment to know that we might not be able to get something to a person the next day, and that's okay. You know, we have to transport them safely because they're large pieces of equipment.
Right.
We do lend them out for 14 days at a time. I forgot to mention that. So that's our window right now for those.
So
And-
let me, so let me ask you this. Did you think about carrying cases at all for your telescopes? Where'd you end up with that?
I mentioned something to Jerelyn and she shot down my idea, but that was not a very secure carrying case. It was more of a tub. So we just decided to transport them as they are. They're equipment, but they're pretty sturdy for what they are, in my opinion. I mean, we haven't had really any acknowledged problems, despite however many months it is now of transporting them around the city and people taking them home. And I mean, we can tell them to strap them into their front seat, but I don't know that they're necessarily doing that. So I feel confident that they're not just going to break by someone looking at it. So no, I did not look for a carrying case.
So this is I'll just go ahead and talk about this just a moment. It's a very common question because we deal with lots and lots of libraries. And in fact, in St. Louis, one library almost refused to start the program without a carrying case. But what we found is that you're already making modifications to this telescope to start with, and there's really not a good carrying case that really works with it. And we found that when we put in a carrying case, it actually would mess up the telescope work worse than if you actually didn't put it into a carrying case. And the best way to really transport is actually to put it in the front, like in one of your car seats, and seat belted in, just like a kid. And we have done hundreds of telescopes that way, and it's across the nation and actually across the country. I think the world, I think people are just doing that very simple thing, and it works pretty well. And I think actually having everything exposed makes people be a little more safe with it, because if it's in a duffel bag, they're going to throw it like luggage, just drop it down, and then you mess up the optics and things like that. So that's a really good point.
And I just wanted to say, if anyone does have any questions about our program, since this is a short webinar and not me talking for 8 hours about my processes, my email is SKI, T as in Tom, T as in Tom, RE, L as in Larry, L as in Larry at wichita.gov. And I am always happy to talk collections. So.
Yeah, we found a lot of libraries very helpful. In fact, that when we started, it was very helpful. A lot of libraries are quite happy to share their best practice. And frankly, we've learned from each other as we go along. So what kind of age group, it looks like one of the folks had a question about age group, do you suggest with children starting in grammar school, like daytime, what kind of age group would really work with this telescope from your perspective?
I don't necessarily have a good answer to that, because our telescopes have not yet hit the shelf. And COVID has messed up a lot of our outreach opportunities. I was hoping to target it towards the teenagers, just in some areas of the city where they maybe didn't have the resources that some other areas of the city did. But my understanding from what I've heard is that the telescope is very easy to use. And yes, children should be able to use it, with their parents, and then maybe by themselves after they've had some training. But I mean, if and when we do star parties, that will certainly be all ages. I think as long as the child can appreciate that it's a piece of equipment and not a toy, I would hope it would be fine.
Sure. So Jerelyn and Tom, do you have any additions to that comment from your perspective about young children using the telescope?
Well, I'll go ahead and make a comment. Last summer, last fall, I guess, when we were trying to promote the telescope program with the International Library Telescope Program, I went through and trained several kids, like 7 kids, through the Sky Puppy program. So they're like right there in that age, because they have to go through the program before their 11th birthday. Anyway, I invited those kids who had graduated from that Sky Puppy course to help me with the promoting the telescopes at these rural libraries. And so we went through a rehearsal, and then they actually helped me with it, and they had a ball with it. So I had them show the patrons that came by on how to use the telescope. So I wanted them to see how easy it was for anybody to use it. Even 11 or 12-year-old kid can do this. Anybody can do this. And they had a ball with it. It was really a fun activity.
Tom, what about you? Have you had any luck with the youngsters using it?
Yeah, I had a similar experience to what Jerelyn said. I started out teaching the adults to use the telescope. And I thought then the adults could teach the kids. But it didn't take long to figure out that the kids were going to be impatient. They wanted to learn. And plus, if the kids are very excited about it, and they generally are because they've come to this sort of like a presentation of it, and I kind of brag that I can teach a motivated 10-year-old to use the telescope in 10 minutes. Adults take about twice as long. The kids do it. I mean, if they're not motivated, that's an issue, right? But if they're motivated, I mean, I had a kid last night at a local library, and I think he was about 8, and he was excited. He picked it up real quick, and it really is amazing how quickly the kids can pick it up.
Yeah, usually I find that the little 5-year-olds start teaching their parents how to use the telescope, which really cracks me up. So it's kind of funny. So Sarah, tell me a little bit about how you promote the program. Obviously, this is a little tough with COVID time. You're coming out of the COVID period here where you couldn't really do anything. So how do you promote the library telescope program and make this thing keep checking out one after another?
So at the beginning, we did the social media. We did a news release. We were lucky enough to have articles in the local paper, and I believe on some of the news stations as well when it launched. We haven't really had to do much other promotion at this point. I think they put it occasionally on Facebook, just as part of our library of things. It is the object that was used as the main image for our library of things, which gives it consistent exposure when that's promoted. Mm-hmm. But I think word of mouth actually may be helping to spread the word about this, or someone sees another person carrying a telescope out of the library, or they see it on the whole shelf for someone and say, ooh, that would be exciting. We're not having holds placed every day now, but we're still getting several a week. So people are still finding out about the program, or their 2 weeks weren't enough and they wanted to get it again, or who knows. Once we do run out of, once items do start hitting the shelf, which, maybe in another 6 or 9 months, we might start seeing that. We do plan to pull 5 of the telescopes into a programming set so that we can actually do programs around the city with multiple telescopes, give more people a chance to experience them. And that hopefully should also drive interest when that happens. So
I have one question for Sarah. I'd like to, do you have any type of feedback from some of the people that have checked it out? I've
heard that people have been very excited. One of my coworkers' sons just adored it. And I think they were thinking about getting their own telescope based off of the experience that they've had. I haven't had feedback that has made it really directly to me, though I know I definitely heard how excited people were to be able to borrow it. I haven't really been around at the check-in portion of the process, but I mean, if people weren't enjoying it, we would not still be having the hold list that we're having. So word is spreading somehow to people that are not, weren't there at the beginning. So
what is your checkout period right now? Is it 1, 2, 3 weeks, or what?
It's 14 days.
Is what?
14 days.
Okay, 2 weeks basically. Okay, yeah. All right, cool. Very good. So that's a decent time, because a lot of times, obviously, if it's a week, if they can't. Sometimes they'll get clouds, and sometimes you get clouds in 2 weeks, but they probably have a decent chance of getting some skies along the way. Is that right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Hopefully.
Yeah. So we're actually been answering questions along the way, which is great. That's fine. So tell me, what would you recommend to somebody, let's say another library or even an astronomy club, maybe Jerelyn, if they're wanting to start a program? What would you say to them? What would be your advice to them?
I would try to check some of the boxes, like, do you have a place to store it? Do you have a funding source? And do you have money available for, replacement pieces if needed? I'm lucky I haven't had to use that funding yet, but it's there if and when it happens. I would make sure, talk to your circulation staff. I've learned that, not quite the hard way over the last year, but I've learned that they are person number about 3 on my list of happy ideas. Wouldn't it be fun if we could do XYZ? I mean, they're really not as scary as I think you might think they are. They're far less work than the Steam to Go kits that we started circulating for middle schoolers, actually right before we started circulating telescopes, because there's only about 4 pieces for the telescope. These other things had about 30. So it's, they're very well put together. If you get the Cornerstones of Science one, everything's contained in a little pack, and it makes it as unintimidating as possible. We looked at this as a very good opportunity for donor funding. We certainly did not have the money to do it in our normal budget. So I think it is, depending on your community, a good outreach to a donor who might like to support astronomy because they love it, sciences, STEAM, something like that. And I would definitely, if I was just starting it, this request would be with my foundation person right now to look for someone to fund it. So
as I remember from our talk before, you actually let the staff check out the telescopes first. Is that right? Was that your secret weapon to get them engaged in this, maybe?
Well, I don't know if it was a secret weapon. They not so subtly put holds on it first, which I normally discourage, but I think it did help. Our circulation manager checked it out immediately. I think she was the first hold, and some other circulation and branch staff also checked it out. And I think them having that experience gave them confidence to talk about it with customers. So yes, I did not put a stop to it when I saw it happening.
Yeah, so Jerelyn, let me ask you, because we're running close to our time here, our half hour, which is great. We've been having a good conversation here. From an astronomy club, what would you say about supporting a program like this? Now, obviously, and we didn't clarify this, so a very typical way to do is you buy a telescope and you can make changes yourself, which astronomy clubs can do that, or Cornerstones of Science, which I don't know they're actually going to do that going forward. I think for right now, there's been a pause. And frankly, there's been a little bit of a backlog as far as getting telescopes. It's kind of hard right now to get telescopes because of pipeline issues. But talk about that from an astronomy club's point of view. What kind of thinking that you guys have to go through to support a program like this?
Well, it mostly just started with me because I went ahead and got that free telescope from the Astronomical League. And that just kind of what planted the seed right there. And I started going from there. And after I put in a couple of telescopes and started selling them to like the rural communities in the area where I live, and it started to become more popular. And then Sarah decided she wanted to buy 10 of them. And I said, holy cow. And then that's when I started getting other club members interested in it. And right now, I've been invited to the Lawrence Astronomy Club to give them a presentation about this program, because
Nice.
now they are interested. And I've been, communicating with all the presidents at the different clubs here in the state of Kansas and see if I could get them interested. And mostly is because I'm going to try to put a telescope in their local area, but I don't want to step on their toes. But if they're not interested, then I'm going to put a telescope there.
Well, that's awesome.
And I should have said in my list of things to look at, make sure you have a club to support you, because this went so much more smoothly because of Jerelyn and all of her help. It just made a world of difference. So very appreciative.
So Tom, just talk briefly about the Astronomical League, and they do a giveaway once a year. Is that right, for telescopes? You want to talk about that briefly, Tom?
Sure. The Horkheimer Foundation donates the money to provide.
Hey, Tom, maybe you could first explain what the Astronomical League is, because there may be libraries that have no clue what that is actually.
Sure. The Astronomical League is sort of a conglomeration of astronomy clubs across the United States. I believe there's over 300 clubs, and last I heard it was like 18,000 members across the country. So it's fairly big. And the Horkheimer Foundation donated money to help get more telescopes out there. And one is given to each region of the country. There are 10 regions within the Astronomical League's setup as to where the clubs are located. And they do a drawing, and each region gets a telescope, which they then are going to, give to a library and help the library use it and promote the program. So it's a really good program, and that gets 10 free ones out there. They are somewhat costly, $350, $400, and things are going up in cost now because of the pandemic, but a lot of clubs donate telescopes as well. So there's a lot of ways to get it done if the library doesn't have the money. There's a lot of other people and things that are helping to get these things done.
Okay, great. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap up here. Sarah, any final words? I did get a note here, Jerelyn, that they're looking forward to your presentation in Lawrence next week. So you got a fan out there already. That's really good.
Oh, I bet you that's Heschmeyer.
Yes, it is. Yeah, there you go. Awesome. Sarah, any final words? And by the way, we appreciate all of you guys being on here. This really makes it really nice to have a nice chat about all this.
Well, I encourage any libraries out there to look at this program, because it really brings excitement to your community about the library and makes people realize it's not just books, though we have books about astronomy too. So we can bundle it all
One more
together.
question to Sarah.
Yes.
Hey, were you guys ever worried about a telescope going out and not coming back?
We are prepared for that. I mean, if it happens, it happens. So far, knock on wood, that has not happened. I think that the price of the telescope is perhaps a little prohibitive, but we are prepared to charge people for it. So,
Yeah,
but
I've talked to some libraries, and that's what's preventing them from wanting to get into the program, because they're afraid that the telescope won't come back.
That's always that's always a possibility. And I will say that what happened in St. Louis is that some libraries found they didn't have a very good checkout system, because what they did is they had a person with no real address anymore. They moved. There's no phone numbers. So it made them start confirming that the library card they were using was actually a good card. So that means they can actually find the person. So if you have a person who's moved and they don't have an address anymore, you have no phone, they check out a telescope and they never come back, then you have no way to get in touch with them. And sometimes they just forget for a while. They take too long, and it eventually shows up. 6 months to get bored with it, and they have to return it. One day they just walk in and give it to you. It's like, okay.
Yeah, we have not had any not come back yet. I'm sure it will happen one day, but so far, nothing yet.
Yeah.
So
Right.
You
So
haven't
we have,
even been in the program for a year yet.
Yeah. So we
Yeah.
have one last question. I'll go ahead and answer that. Then we're going to go ahead and sign off. Then one of the persons asked, how do they apply for that Astronomical League? So what you have to do is you have to work through your astronomy club, and then they can put a request in. In other words, through the Astronomy League, there's a Astronomical League. There's a way that you can do that, and it's a drawing. So in other words, they have a chance to win. That's what it is. So it doesn't mean you automatically get it. You can be one of the clubs that can win it. And so just go to your Astronomical League, go to astronomicalleague.org, look up a club in your area, and then you can apply, work with them to apply. And a lot of them just don't apply. So if they don't apply, it gets your chance better, because if your club applies, maybe they'll actually get one.
Well, I think there's also a link in the librarytelescope.org
Yeah.
website. There's a link there.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, all of you. Great time tonight. It was always enjoying learning about libraries across the country, and actually it's across the world. We've been talking a little bit about the USA tonight. We do have programs in the Netherlands and the United Kingdom, and quite a few in Canada. So we very much appreciate your time, and thank you. And it'll take a day or
Thank
so to
you.
get this recording out on YouTube, but it'll get out there. And just go to the librarytelescope.org, click the YouTube button at the top, or look on Facebook. It'll be there as well. So thanks everyone, and have a great
Thank
evening.
you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. So long.
Bye.